you ready for the truth? Bring it on.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Do you want the whole truth?
I don't think you're ready.
Governments don't control things. A government can't control the economy without controlling people.
It's Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Here comes the truth.
Nothing But Truth, probably on 8FR Talk. So, what happened at the House Oversight Committee hearing today? Darrell Issa hinted that we would hear of a direct connection all the way to the White House. On the line with us right now, and it's been way too long, the Gateway Pundit himself, Jim Hoft, who has not only been bringing us updates on the protests turning violent in regard to the verdict of George Zimmerman, but also has been delivering and been at the forefront of delivering us news when it comes to the issue of the IRS targeting Tea Party and other conservative groups. Jim, welcome back.
Great to be with you, Crane.
So any bombshells today?
You know, I don't think, I think what's going on with the House Oversight Committee right now is they're just kind of plugging away. They're prodding along, getting more information all the time on this IRS scandal. As I've reported several times, Crane, at least 292 conservative groups have been targeted in this scandal. What I thought today was just so shameful, though, was that during this committee hearing, we're seeing Democrats now, their strategy has been to, they're trying to discredit one of the IRS officials who originally came out with the leak because he was a Bush appointee. So they're trying to discredit him. And then they're trying to say that leftist groups were targeted too, which is not factually correct. It's not correct at all. So it's really shameful that their tactics they're using. They're trying to do everything they can to protect this president and the White House. And the hearings today, though, did link, I believe, an official who was working with the IRS. It's getting closer and closer to the White House. So they just keep plugging away. I think they have more information than they're letting on right now.
When they say that, I know that John Lewis yesterday and questioning IRS chief mentioned that stuff was being withheld, and as you just spoke to, they were doing it to progressive groups too, specifically the word progressive. And you're saying that's not true. And the proportion is, if somebody says, yeah, they did it to both, but the proportion is 10-1, that's
right.
That's pretty bad. But it's even worse than that, isn't it?
Well, Crane, it is. And here's the dishonesty here with what the left is doing. When a leftist group came up that said something like Occupy, which might have been a word that was the IRS was targeting, they were fast-tracked through. They were actually fast-tracked through the progressive groups. So when the left is saying, yes, we were targeted too, what they're not telling you is that when the leftist group was identified, they were fast-tracked, while at the same time conservative groups were having to wait 2-3 years to get approval for the tax-exempt status. So I want to be clear with that, so your audience knows that. So the left, I don't believe, is being honest at all about this. They must be very scared with what's going to come out in this investigation.
It seems that the plans that, or the process that caused the bottleneck, we understand it actually was caused by Lois Lerner's office, which tells us we have some central planning. We also, as you've talked about before, we're seeing things that many have described as unprecedented, and I think that's the word used by those who were not at the very top, but certainly were attempting to process the scrutiny that was given. Is it fair to say that the scrutiny given to these targeted conservative groups has been unprecedented?
Absolutely, and that came out in the testimony today. I believe it was Issa who asked the the IRS official who's retired now, his name is Hull, last name is Hull, if he had seen anything like this before. And the former employee said no, he had not seen anything like this in the past. So it's going to be interesting as this develops, just where this leads us. But all along, Crane, we know that the Tea Party has been a major threat to the left. They really got people excited and out on the street, and so it won't be a surprise if this does lead up to some political figures in the White House, although it has not as of yet.
And we will go where the evidence takes us, and that really is what it's about, and getting there. And Trey Gowdy, some highlights, we will play those for you tomorrow, along with some other video/audio, and we'll post some on the Facebook about his response to the character assassination, as he sees it, of the IG, Inspector General. He references the fact that when you don't have the facts and you go after the person who is bringing the facts, you go after the messenger or the judge, if you will. And it seems to be very clear. Speaking of judge, just a few minutes, but I have to ask you about this. I look to other news sources as well, and I'm not seeing what you have been posting, and it worries me because you point this out. There has been a good deal, relatively, of violence in these protests in response to the verdict to George Zimmerman. What types of acts of violence are we seeing, Jim?
Well, Crane, I'm glad we're discussing this, too, because, like you said, the liberal media hasn't reported any of the truth on this story. And that's why I believe my blog has been such a success, and other conservative blogs, because we're reporting what's really going on. The media has been saying that these Trayvon protests have been mostly peaceful. What they won't tell you is that there's been several people arrested. There was 4 people arrested in St. Louis, where I live. That didn't get much attention. There was rioters in Oakland, in Washington State, in L.A. Several people have been arrested in L.A. from rioting. There's been protesters in Atlanta that have been arrested. There was an incident in Houston that I wrote about, Crane, and briefly, what happened was this family, their grandbaby was having an asthma attack, and they had to rush to the hospital. They got stuck on the highway because these Trayvon protesters had shut down the highway. This grandmother tries to drive her. She's screaming at these protesters. They cut through the grass to get around the protest, and somebody smacked her in the face. I put a post up on this. It didn't get any national attention. It's outrageous what's going on, and I think Americans need to be aware of both sides of the story, so that's why I put this up.
And we have a clip, and I'm going to have to ask you back on the program tomorrow if you can, because the Daily Caller actually addressed the security not only, specifically toward George Zimmerman and his family, because I understand they've been receiving threats. Is that true?
Absolutely.
Okay. And the question was handled in a way of Jay Carney saying it's ridiculous, and the question would be obviously not supporting violence in any way. That was Carney's response. And then it became an issue of the Daily Caller happened to be an intern who was asking that question. Yet we do have the president intervening and injecting himself into this case. And, yes, calling for calm afterwards, but a Department of Justice that was funding and organizing the protest. This is a story you've been all over, and like Katrina and other stories that you've been all over, giving us the rest of the story, Jim. It's been outstanding, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You take care.
Thank you so much, Crane.
Always, brother. That is Jim Hoft, the Gateway Pundit. The Gateway Pundit. And like American Family News, you can go to onenewsnow.com, by the way, you're exposed to bloggers and award-winning bloggers and journalists. Speaking of journalist that I'm sure he's had to win an award, because I look at his work every day when it's out there. When he produces, I'm there. And he's going to give you a take on Trayvon Martin you haven't heard. Crane Something of a Truth, AFR Talk.